to obstetrics and gynecology videos. In the previous all videos, we were discussing about the pregnancy, issues of pregnancy, problems of delivery. So far, we didn't see what is happening during the normal labor process. So today we are going to see about the normal labor. First, let us see the definition of normal labor. It's a series of events that takes place in the genital organ in an effort to expel the viable products of conception out of the womb through the vagina into the outer world is called labor. That is, if we are expelling the viable fetus, that is the fetus should be alive and the delivery should happen through the vagina and it should be without any external processes. Naturally it should occur. Then only we are calling it as normal labor. For example, if you are just making an opening over the abdomen and if you are taking the baby out through the cesarean, we won't include it under the normal labor. And usually it occurs after 37 completed weeks of pregnancy, and if it is occurring before 37 weeks of pregnancy, it is called preterm labor. Preterm labor. And in some of the books, it is given as 36 completed weeks of pregnancy. Delivery is the expulsion and extraction of viable fetus out of the womb. So delivery is different and normal labor is also different. In the delivery, we can include even cesarean delivery also. Only the extraction of viable fetus out of the womb only is coming under the delivery. Next, we can see the normal labor. Normal labor is otherwise known as ectosia. And if the labor is said to be normal, it should fulfill certain criteria. We are going to see those criteria. One thing, the onset of labor should be spontaneous. That is, without any external forces, naturally the labor process should start. And it should occur at term. That is, if it is occurring before 36 completed week of pregnancy, we won't call it as normal labor. And the presentation should be vertex and without undue prolongation. That is, the labor process has to get completed within the limited period of time. That limited period of time I will be telling later how much time can be taken. That I will explain you later. And natural termination with minimal aids. If you want, you can terminate with minimal aids. Okay. And it should occur without any complications which are affecting the mother and the baby. That is, if the labor is said to be normal, it should occur, the onset of the labor should be normal, natural, and it should occur at term, and the presentation should be vertex, and the duration of labor should be within limit, and it should occur without any complication for the mother and baby. Then only we will call that labor as normal labor or ectosia. Next one is abnormal labor. This abnormal labor is otherwise known as dystocia. Dystocia. That is any deviation from the normal. Already we have seen the criteria for the normal labor. If there is any deviation in those criteria, that labor we are calling as abnormal labor. For example, if there is any complication for the mother, or if complication is there for the baby, or if the duration of labor is getting prolonged, in those cases we will be calling it as abnormal labor. Next, we can see the date of onset of labor. Actually, the exact prediction of the date of onset of labor is not possible, but we can calculate it by using the Naegele's formula. That is, you will get a rough idea about the date of labor by using the Naegele's formula. Based on the formula, approximately we can tell the date of onset of labor. On the expected date, actually if you are calculating by using Naegele's formula, on the correct expected date, only 4% of the deliveries are occurring. And 1 week on either side, that is 1 week prior to the calculated date or 1 week after the calculated date, 50% of the deliveries are occurring. And sometimes 80% of the deliveries are occurring 2 weeks earlier and 1 week later. That is, from the date either 2 weeks earlier or 1 week later, 80% of the deliveries are occurring. And 10% of the deliveries are occurring at 42 weeks, and 4% of the deliveries are occurring at 43 weeks. By using the Naegele's formula, we are calculating only up to 40 weeks. But 10% of deliveries are occurring at 42 weeks and 4% at 43 weeks. Next, we can see the causes of onset of labor. Already I told you that the onset should be spontaneous without any external factors. And sometimes you might have thought how this spontaneous onset of labor process will occur all of a sudden. So these are the causes, or we are assuming that these are the causes, but actually the exact cause of onset of labor is unknown. But the theories are suggesting that these seven are the causes. First, let us see these causes one by one. First one is uterine distension. That is, we know that towards the end of the pregnancy, day by day, the size of the uterus will be increasing and it will be distending the uterus maximum. So the muscles of the uterus will get stretched and it will get thinned. This excessive stretching and thinning will stimulate the muscles of the uterus, and this stimulation will go to the posterior pituitary of the mother, and thereby production of oxytocin will occur, and that is the reason for the onset of labor. One theory is telling that, and another theory is telling that fetoplacental contribution is the reason, and estrogen level, progesterone level, prostaglandin level, oxytocin, and neurological factors, all these factors are playing role. So let us see these factors one by one. Next, first one is estrogen. Increase the release of oxytocin from the maternal pituitary. That is, towards the end of the pregnancy or towards the term, the level of estrogen in the body will be increasing, and this high level of estrogen will help for the release of oxytocin from the pituitary, and it promotes the synthesis of receptors of oxytocin in the myometrium and residua. When the pituitary is producing oxytocin, actually the uterine endometrium and the residua myometrium should have receptor cells for the oxytocin, and these cells should be, or these receptor cells should be sensitive to the oxytocin. Actually, during the pregnancy, the cells will be having less sensitivity towards the oxytocin, and only few cells will be there. And this estrogen promotes the synthesis of this receptor cells for oxytocin, and it accelerates lysosomal disintegration in amnion cells, resulting in increased prostaglandin synthesis. Prostaglandin is getting secreted from the fetal membranes and from the endometrium, and when the lysosomal disintegration is happening, that stimulation of the fetal membranes, that is amnion and chorion or amnion cells, that because of that stimulation, it will produce the stimulation of the amnion and chorion. Because of that stimulation, that will start to produce the prostaglandin, and that prostaglandin will produce the uterine contraction. Actually, the onset of labor is onset of uterine contraction only, and this onset of uterine contraction is occurring due to the effect of oxytocin and prostaglandin. And oxytocin and prostaglandin is getting produced by the effect of this progesterone. And another one stimulates the synthesis of myometrial contractile protein, that is actinomycin through CMP. That is, this estrogen increase or stimulates the synthesis of myometrial contractile protein, and it increases the excitability of the myometrial cells membranes also. So these are the functions of the estrogen. Because of these functions, towards the end of the pregnancy, oxytocin, this estrogen level will be increasing, and this high level of estrogen, we have seen what are the things this estrogen is doing. It will stimulate the production of prostaglandin, oxytocin, myometrial contractile protein, and it stimulates the excitability of the myometrial cells, and it promotes oxytocin receptors, or promotes the synthesis of oxytocin receptors in the myometrium. Next one is progesterone. By the end of the pregnancy, the amount of progesterone will start to decrease. That is, increased fetal production of dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate, DHEAS, and cortisol inhibits the conversion of fetal progesterone to progesterone. So the progesterone level will start to fall before the onset of the labor. Actually, the progesterone is the main hormone which is helping for the maintenance of pregnancy. And when the progesterone level is decreasing, naturally the pregnancy support also will decrease. And how it is getting decreased means the conversion of fetal progesterone to progesterone will get inhibited because of the high production of getting matured, it will start to produce more cortisol, and this increased production of dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate from the fetus also will occur, and these two things will decrease the conversion of fetal progesterone to progesterone. And it is the alteration in estrogen progesterone ratio rather than the fall in the absolute concentration of progesterone which is linked with the prostaglandin synthesis. So the estrogen level will be increasing and prostaglandin level will be decreasing, and this imbalance between estrogen and progesterone will stimulate the production of prostaglandin, and prostaglandin already I have told you that it is producing the uterine contractions. And next one is prostaglandin. Prostaglandin are the important factors which initiate and maintain the labor. The three major sites for the synthesis of prostaglandin are, already I have told you, amnion, orion and endometrium cells, and little from the myometrium also. So the synthesis of prostaglandin will get triggered by the rise in estrogen level, glucocorticoids from the baby, mechanical stretching in the late pregnancy, increase in the cytokines due to infection, due to vaginal examination, and if you are separating the membranes and if you are rupturing the membranes. Because of these reasons, that is any factor which is stimulating or which is irritating the fetal membrane, that will trigger or that will increase the production of prostaglandin. So if you are performing the artificial rupture of the membrane, if you are doing the vaginal examination, all these times you will be irritating these membranes. So that will stimulate the production of prostaglandin. Next, oxytocin. Oxytocin receptors are increased in the uterus with the onset of labor, and oxytocin promotes the release of prostaglandin from the decidua. Oxytocin synthesis is increased in the decidua and in the placenta. Vaginal examination and amniotomy cause a rise in the maternal plasma oxytocin level, and it will produce the Ferguson reflex. Oxytocin is the main hormone which is producing uterine contraction, and this oxytocin level will be increasing. Already we have seen the reason for that, increasing during the pregnancy, and this high level of oxytocin will promote the release of prostaglandin from the decidua, and it will oxytocin level, a mild amount of oxytocin is getting produced from the decidua and from the placenta also. And when you are doing the vaginal examination and when you are performing the amniotomy, already I told you that prostaglandin level will be increasing and oxytocin level also will increase, and this will give a reflex to the lady, that is the lady will get a tendency to push the baby down, and that reflex is known as Ferguson's reflex. Next one is neurological factors. Both alpha and beta receptors are present in the myometrium. Estrogen causing the alpha receptors and progesterone the beta receptors to function predominantly. The contractile response is initiated through the alpha receptors and the postganglionic nerve fibers in and around the cervix and the lower part of the uterus. So the neurological factors are also a cause for the onset of labor. So far we have seen the main causes for the onset of labor. Next we can see the false labor pain. Sometimes the lady may get pain and you may mistaken it as the onset of labor and you may take the lady to the hospital, but it may not be a true labor pain. So first we should identify the features of false labor pain. It will be dull in nature and usually it will be there in the lower part of the abdomen and towards the groin, and it is continuous, but it won't be associated with the hardening of the uterus, that is it won't be associated with the contraction of the uterus, and dilatation of the cervix will not be there along with the pain, and usually if you are giving medications it will get relieved. So first, if the lady is getting pain, you should feel the uterus and you should see whether the uterus is getting contracted or not. If the uterus is not getting contracted, we can think that it's a false pain. And usually, if it is a true labor pain, all over the abdomen, especially at the top level of the uterus or at the frontal region of the abdomen, she will be having pain. But here the pain will be mainly towards the lower portion and especially towards the groin. And it won't be associated with the dilatation of the cervix. That we cannot, layman cannot assess. But the first two features a layman also can assess. Next, pre-labor or pre-monitory stage. Actually, it begins before the onset of the labor. In primigravida mothers, that is a lady with her first pregnancy, this will happen 2 to 3 weeks before the onset of true labor. And in multigravida mothers, it will occur only just few days prior to the onset of the labor. Next, we can see the features of the pre-labor. In that first one is lightening. See this picture. Here you can see the size of the uterine fundus is up to the Sifort process of the sternum, but here it is little down. And why it is happening means, here in the first picture you just see the fetal head was at the level of the pelvic brim, but here the fetal head has entered into the brim of the pelvis, that is the baby came down. So when the baby is entering into the pelvis, what will happen to the height of the uterus or height of the fundus? That height of the fundus will decrease. So that process is the lightening. And usually if the uterus is up to the Sifort process of the sternum, the lady will be having breathing difficulty or she will get a suffocated feeling. But when the uterus is coming down, that is when the baby is coming down, the size of the uterus also will come down. So she will get a relief from that distressing symptoms. That's why we are calling it as lightening. This lightening is the feature of pre-labor. Once if the lightening has occurred, you can expect the labor within 1 or 2 weeks. Next, cervical changes. That is effacement of the cervix will occur, that is length of the cervix will decrease, and appearance of false pain. In between she will get the false pain also. So these are the features of pre-labor. Next, we can see the features of true labor pain. These are painful uterine contractions and it will occur at regular intervals. And the contraction with increasing intensity and duration, that is duration of the contraction and intensity of the contraction will be increasing. And it will be associated with show. What is show, that I will tell you in the coming slide. And along with the uterine contraction, effacement and dilatation of the cervix also will be there. This effacement and dilatation of the cervix also I will explain later, and formation of the bag of water also will be there. So this also I will explain to you. These are the features of true labor pain. You just remember, these are painful uterine contractions at regular intervals, contraction with increasing intensity and duration. It is associated with show, progressive effacement and dilatation of the cervix will be there, formation of bag of water will be there. And the stages of labor can be divided into first, second, third and fourth stage. First stage of labor starts from the onset of true labor pain and ends with the full dilatation of the cervix. And in other words, it is called cervical stage of labor. The first stage of labor is always known as cervical stage of labor, and it starts with the onset of true labor pain and ends with the full dilatation of the cervix. The average duration of first stage of labor is 12 hours in primigravida and 6 hours in multigravida. And this first stage is again divided into latent phase and active phase. Latent phase means it's a time between the onset of labor, that is onset of true labor pain, up to 3 to 4 centimeter dilatation of the cervix and the full effacement of the cervix. And it usually lasts between 3 to 8 hours. And in multiparous woman, the duration will be shorter. So the latent phase starts from the onset of labor and ends with the 3 to 4 centimeter dilatation of the cervix. By that time, the full effacement of the cervix might have occurred. And the second phase, it is the active stage and it starts with the 3 to 4 centimeter dilatation of the cervix and ends with full dilatation of the cervix. The full dilatation of the cervix is 10 centimeter. That is 3 to 4 to 10 centimeter dilatation is the active phase. And the duration of this phase is also 2 to 6 hours, and this will be less in the case of multiparous. Next, during the active phase, the cervical dilatation will occur. Already we have seen that is 3 to 4 to 10 centimeter dilatation will occur in the active phase. There is 1 centimeter dilatation will occur, or sometimes it will occur more than 1 centimeter in 1 hour. Next is the second stage of labor. It starts with the full dilatation of the cervix and ends with the expulsion of the fetus from the birth canal. And this also has got two phases, propulsive phase and expulsive propulsive phase starts with the full dilatation of the cervix and ends with the full descent of the baby. That is, the presenting part will come up to the pelvic floor. The fetus will come down and the presenting part will be at the pelvic floor. And expulsive phase means it is the expulsion of the or delivery of the baby out. And average duration of the second stage is 2 hours in primigravida mothers and 1 hour in multipara. And next is third stage. Third stage starts with the expulsion of the fetus and ends with the expulsion of the placenta and membranes. It involves the control of bleeding also. That is, third stage is the stage of placental delivery. And the duration of third stage is 30 minutes. And the next one is fourth stage. Fourth stage begins with the delivery of the placenta and membranes and ends after 2 hours. It's only a stage of observation. So the stages are first, second, third and fourth. First stage starts with the onset of true labor pain and ends with the full dilatation of the cervix. Second starts with the full dilatation of the cervix and ends with the delivery of the baby. And third is the placental delivery. Fourth is the stage of observation. And now we can see the physiology of first stage of labor. In that, first one is uterine action. How the uterus is acting. In the uterine action, first we can see the fundal dominance. The uterine contractions will be starting at the uterine fundus, especially at the corona. Corona is the region where the fundus is getting joined with the fallopian tube. It will start over there and this will spread across the uterus. The contraction lasts longest in the fundus of the uterus and it will be more intense in the fundus of the uterus. And when it is coming downward, it will start to fade. That is known as fundal dominance. That is, the upper part of the uterus will be contracting and retracting vigorously. That is the fundal dominance. Next is polarity. Polarity means it's a neuromuscular harmony between the upper and lower segment of the uterus or between the two poles of the uterus. That is, during the uterine contraction, the upper segment of the uterus will be contracting and retracting strongly, but the lower poles contract slightly and dilates, and it allows the passage of the baby. Because when the upper segment is contracting, along with that, if the lower segment is also contracting, the baby will not pass out. So the upper segment will be contracting and retracting, and it will act as like a piston over the baby, and it will push the baby down or push the baby out. At the same time, the lower segment will be contracting slightly and it will dilate. And this is known as the polarity. Here you can see the picture of contraction and retraction. This is the size of the normal uterine muscle. Assume that this is the size. And during the contraction, it will come to this size. And after the contraction, actually it will get relaxed. When it is getting relaxed, it will hold certain amount of contraction. It will not go back to this stage. So its size has reduced, and finally slowly after each and every contraction, gradually its size will be decreasing and it will become small. So this is the contraction and retraction. This is contraction and this is retraction. Contraction means it's a full contraction. Retraction means it is holding certain amount of contraction after the relaxation. And next is formation of upper and lower uterine segment. The upper uterine segment having been formed from the body of the fundus, and it is mainly concerned with the contraction and retraction, and it is thick and muscular. Already we have seen fundal dominance. This fundus and the body of the uterus is forming the upper uterine segment, and the lower uterine segment is formed by the isthmus and the cervix. Isthmus of the uterus and cervix is forming the lower uterine segment. It is about 8 to 10 centimeter length, and the lower segment is prepared for the distension and dilatation. That also we have seen already. The muscle content reduces from the fundus to the cervix, so the cervix will be thinner when compared with the fundus. Formation of upper and lower uterine segment. We were discussing that only. When the labor begins, the retracted longitudinal fibers in the upper segment pull the lower segment, causing it to stretch. This aid by the descending presenting part. That is, when the upper segment is retracting. The size of the muscles is decreasing over here. So when the size of the muscle is decreasing, actually it will start to pull the lower segment, and when it is getting pulled upward, here this area will get distended. This area, when see if something is pulling it upward, what will happen? Naturally this area will get distended. So that's the thing which is happening here. And along with that, see here the baby is coming downward and the fetal head is hitting over here. The baby is descending downward and it is hitting over this part, and this also helps for the dilatation of the cervix. Next is retraction ring. In the previous picture, you might have observed that between the upper and lower segment, there was a constriction or mild constriction was there, and this ridge forms between the upper and lower uterine segment is known as the retraction ring. Physiologically, the ring gradually rises as the upper uterine segment contracts and retracts, and the lower uterine segment thins out to accommodate the descending fetus. Once the cervix is fully dilated and the fetus can leave the uterus, the retraction ring rises not further. Next is effacement of the cervix. Effacement refers to the inclusion of the cervical canal into the lower uterine segment. Already I told you that the isthmus and the cervix is forming the lower uterine segment. That is, the cervix will get merged with the isthmus and it forms the lower uterine segment. So the length of the cervix will decrease. That process is the cervical effacement, or it is otherwise known as the taking up of the cervix. It takes place from above downward. That is, the muscle fibers surrounding the internal os are drawn upwards by the retracted upper segment, and the cervix merges into the lower segment of the uterus. The cervical canal widens at the level of the internal os, where the condition of the external os remains unchanged. The internal os start to get dilated also along with that when this merging is happening. This picture will give you a clear picture about the effacement. This is the normal cervix. See, it's having this much of length. See this red portion. And it is plugged with a mucus secretion. And this mucus secretion is known as operculum, that we have seen in the physiological changes during pregnancy. And it prevents the inversion of microorganisms into the uterus. That also we have seen. So during the effacement, what will happen means, see, here it is fully effaced. This was the vagina, it is there, but this lengthened cervix, see here this much length was there for the cervix, and here that length is not there because it has got merged with the lower, it has taken upward and it has got merged with the lower uterine segment, and the cervix become thin, or length of the cervix is not there now and it has become thin, and that process is the effacement of the cervix. Next is cervical dilatation. That is, during the time of pregnancy, the cervix will be fully contracted and it will be fully closed. But during the labor process, because of this upward pulling, already we have seen it is getting pulled upward, it will start to stretch, and at the same time, the presenting part or the fetal head will be hitting over the cervix. These two factors leads to the dilatation of the cervix, and the cervix will start to dilate from 0, and finally it will get dilated up to 10 centimeter. So this picture shows the cervical dilatation. This is this portion here, you can see this is a cervix which is not effaced and which is not dilated, it is closed. Here, see, it has started to dilate, and see the gap, you can see the gap over here, it has started to dilate and it has started to get effaced. Now it is 1 centimeter dilated. Here you just see again the gap is more and it has effaced almost. The length of the cervix is not there. You just see it's just like a membrane only, and it is 5 centimeter dilated. Here it is fully dilated because it has taken up fully and it is fully dilated. And see, the fetal head is hitting directly over here, and this also helps for the dilatation of the cervix. So the cervix dilates from 0 to 10 centimeter. Next is show. Already we have seen the mucus plug in the cervix during the pregnancy. And when the cervix is dilating, what will happen to this mucus plug? It will lose its support and it will come out through the vagina, and it will be blood stained also. So the blood stained mucus discharges few hours before the birth is known as the show. and this blood is due to the ruptured capillaries in the parietal diastole where the chorion has become detached from the dilating cervix. When the cervix is dilating, from that portion the chorion will get detached. That is, the fetal membranes are attached to the endometrium and the cervix. Lower portion is attached to the cervix. And when the cervix is dilating, what will happen? It will get detached from the cervix. And when it is getting detached, there is a chance for rupture of minute capillaries and the bleeding, mild bleeding will occur, and that blood also will come along with that, this mucus discharge. And this actually, if this blood stained mucus discharge is coming out, I have told you that its name is show, and it shows the onset of labor. It shows, or it gives you a signal that the cervix has started to dilate. Next one is formation of foveater. Already I had told you that this fetal membrane, amnion and chorion, is attached to the cervix. And inside this amnion and chorion, amniotic fluid is there. That we know already. Already we have seen it in the fetal development. If in case if you are having any doubt, you just see the previous video about the fertilization and fetal development. And when the lower segment is getting formed, the cervix will get stretched and it will get detached. So what will happen? This amnion and chorion will get detached from the cervix, and inside that fluid is amniotic fluid is also there. So this membrane with the fluid will be there without much support. And when the uterus is contracting, the pressure inside this fluid cavity will increase, and due to this increased pressure, this fluid cavity will start to bulge into the dilated cervix. It will get loosened when it is getting separated, and the sac of fluid will bulge downward 6 to 12 millimeter into the internal os. The well-flexed head will fit snugly to the cervix, and it will cut the connection between the fluid which is there in front of the head and which is there or which surrounds the body. That is, when the fetal head is coming downward, when it is hitting tightly to the cervix, what will happen to the fluid in front? It will lose the connection to the with the fluid which is there at the back side or which surrounds the body. So the fluid which is present in front of the presenting part is known as the forewater, and the fluid which is there which surrounds the body, that is at the back side of the presenting part, that is known as the hindwater. See, this picture will give you a clear picture. This is the amnion and chorion, and this is the amniotic membrane. See here, and this is the amniotic fluid, and this is the endometrium and cervix. When the cervix and endometrium is getting stretched, when the lower uterine segment is getting stretched, it will have detached. See here, it has got detached from the endometrium, separated. And when the uterus is getting contracted, what will happen? Pressure inside this fluid will increase and it will start to bulge. Here it is bulged. It will start to bulge 6 to 12 centimeter. It will bulge into the cervical cavity. And when the head is coming downward, see here the head is tightly fitted. Here also it will get fitted tightly. The head will come like this when the head is coming downward. So the connection between this fluid and the connection between this area will get cut off. So this area is known as the forewater and this area is known as the hindwater. And next factor is general fluid pressure. That is, when the uterus is contracting, already I have told you that the upper segment of the uterus is contracting. See, this shows the uterine contraction. This the pressure will be, this pressure of the uterine contractions will get exerted on the fluid, and since the fluid is not compressible, it will equalize the pressure throughout the uterus. See, from all these areas the pressure will get applied, and this is known as the general fluid pressure. When this portion is getting contracted, the pressure will be applied to the fluid and the fluid will equalize the pressure, and this is known as the general fluid pressure. Next is rupture of the membrane. See, here already I have told you that this membrane is there, but down it's not having any support because slowly the cervix is getting dilated, and from the upper portion it is getting pressure also. The uterus is contracting, so the pressure inside this will be increasing. So finally what will happen? If pressure inside the fluid cavity is increasing, actually it is a thin membrane only, and if it is not having any support, it will break. That is the rupture of the membrane. Usually it will The ideal time for the rupture of the membrane is the end of the first stage of labor, that is after the cervix become fully dilated. So the support of the bag of membranes or bag of water will not be there. That I have already explained. Next is fetal axis pressure. See here already I have told you that the upper segment of the uterus is contracting. See, this arrow mark shows the contraction. Here it is contracting. So it is getting applied directly over the fetal axis or upper pole of the uterus. During each contraction, the uterus rises forward and force the fundal contraction is transmitted to the upper pole of the fetus. And when it is getting applied over the upper pole of the uterus, upper pole of the fetus, it will get transferred to the lower pole through the fetal axis. From here, when it is getting applied over the buttocks through the fetal axis, it will come to the lower part of the uterus. And this is known as the fetal axis pressure. So these are the main events which are happening in the first stage of labor, or these are the physiology of the first stage of labor. The second stage of labor physiology and the physiology of the third stage of labor we will be discussing in the next video. Thank you for watching this video.